In my last video, I explained some hidden mechanics in these 7 items, as well as what happens when you get multiple of them. It seems like a lot of you guys really like this type of content, so today we're explaining some more Megabonk items in detail. One note before we start, I am running a modded version of the game to test my theories out, so you'll see this statue guy a lot in this video. This statue just acts like any normal non-boss enemy would, but it has a lot of HP and stands still, so you can test out item interactions pretty easily. I'll leave links in the descriptions for all the mods I use to test out my theories in-game. But anyway, let's start with the electric pluck. The description says that upon taking damage, send out an electric shock to nearby enemies. The pluck triggers once every time you take damage, and every time it procs, it can hit up to 11 enemies within a certain radius. It also has a slight knockback of 1.5 times your knockback stat. How much damage it deals is based on your current level and your damage modifier. But the interesting part about this item is how it works when you get multiple of them. Because sometimes when you pick up an extra copy, it will do literally nothing at all. But other times it will increase the radius so that it can deal damage to enemies that are further away. Whether or not this happens when you pick up a second copy depends on your size modifier. This is because although the radius for the electric pluck depends on your size modifier, this radius is only ever calculated when you pick up a new electric pluck, because that's the only time it recalculates the radius for the electric pluck. So for instance, when you pick up a electric pluck when your size modifier is already maxed out, then a second copy of the electric pluck will never do anything. Next up, let's talk about the spicy meatball. The description says that attacks have a 25% chance to explode, dealing 65% damage to surrounding enemies. This is pretty strong, but what happens when you get multiple of these? Well, the only thing that increases is the radius of the explosions when you get a second copy. This actually works exactly like Grandma's Tonic, where the default starting range of the explosion is 4 meters and the maximum range is 8 meters. You'll reach this maximum after getting 5 copies of the item. Beyond 5 copies, this item does nothing at all. However, there is one very important note here, which is that your explosion range is also affected by your size modifier. How exactly this is calculated can be seen here. If you do the math here, you'll find out that when your size modifier is 2x, you'll already have reached the max explosion radius with one single meatball. This means that if you pick up your first meatball and your size modifier is already 2x, then a second copy of the meatball will do nothing at all for you, since the radius is already at the max cap. One caveat here though is that just like the electric pluck, this modifier only applies to the radius when you pick up the meatball. If your size gets higher while having the meatball, the explosion radius will not change until you pick up another copy of the meatball. So if you pick up a meatball while having 1x size and then later on you get 2x size, you will not see any increase in the explosion. But if you at this point pick up another meatball, you will see a pretty big increase in the explosion, and at that point you'll already have reached the max cap for the radius. So picking up more meatballs after this will do nothing at all. Next up, let's look at the Moldy Cheese. This one gives you a plus 40% chance to poison enemies on hit. While this is probably one of the most accurate explanations for an item in the game, it's not really obvious anywhere how poison damage works. Well, the purple damage you see here on the statue is the poison damage from the Moldy Cheese. The damage counter goes up every time you apply another poison stack, which with one cheese you have a 40% chance of doing every time you hit an enemy. You can see that when my weapon deals 10 damage, the poison effect initially deals 1 damage. How much damage poison does depends on your damage modifier and the amount of poison stacks that are currently on the enemy. Getting multiple copies of Moldy Cheese simply gives you another plus 40% chance. For this specific item, this is additive, so if you have 5 cheeses, you will have 200% chance. In this game, that means that you will always apply 2 poison stacks per hit. This stacks infinitely and can be quite strong for dealing with bosses, especially early on. When an enemy is poisoned, they take damage every 0.33 seconds, and 1 stack of Moldy Cheese poison lasts for 5 seconds. So a single proc of Moldy Cheese will deal damage 15 times over the course of 5 seconds. Next up, let's look at the lightning orb. The description says that it has a 25% chance to summon lightning when hitting enemies, and lightning can now stun enemies. The lightning that it can summon deals 40% of your base hit damage, and whether or not this lightning will stun enemies depends on this formula. where N is the number of lightning orbs you have. As you can see on this chart, the more orbs you have, the higher chance of stunning. This uses hyperbolic scaling like a lot of other items in the game, and the max theoretical chance of stunning caps out at 90%. The exact same type of scaling is used for how often the lightning orb will summon lightning. Now, even though these stats have diminishing returns, the damage output from the lightning orb is linear, as it is directly tied to how many orbs you have. So even though at a certain amount of copies you won't really see that many more enemies getting stunned, it will still deal more damage. Finally, let's look at the Big Bonk item. This one says it has a 2% chance to bonk an enemy, dealing 20x damage. For each extra copy you pick up, you will gain another 1.5% chance for proccing, so a table of proccing chance will look like this. You will eventually, at 67 copies, reach just over 100%. If you go above 100%, this has no extra benefits for this particular items. It just means that at 100% and above, it will proc the bonk hammer on every hit. In terms of damage, this scales linearly with the amount of copies and depends on your base damage, as can be seen in this formula. The bonk hammer also has a small radius every time it gets triggers that just deals your weapon's base damage. The radius for this AoE increases until you've gotten your 10th copy of the hammer. And at that point, this AoE radius reaches a max of 10 and will not go beyond that. However, as I said, the damage multiplier is linear, so this is one of the items that's definitely worth getting as many of as you possibly can. Anyway, that's all the items I have for today, but in my last video, a lot of you guys asked how I figured out exactly how these items work. The answer to that is kind of technical, but the short version is that I analyze how the game system behaves under the hood, and then I try to verify those theories in-game with different mods. Everything that I present in these videos are things that I have found through code analysis and that I could also verify in-game. So I am fairly confident in my findings in these videos. That being said, there is of course a chance I got something wrong here, but if I do, I will pin a new comment with all the updated information. But anyway, that's all for today. Peace.